I would love to introduce y'all to Mark Diaz-Truman, who is our next speaker. Mark is the co-founder of Magpie Games and the Indie Game Development Network. Since 2011, he has led various tabletop game projects and has raised, wait for it, $12.5 million on Kickstarter. So let us see some hype in chat from Mark, and without further ado, welcome him to the stage.
Hi, I'm Mark Diaz-Truman, co-owner and co-founder of Magpie Games. You might know us from games like Masks: A New Generation, Urban Shadows, or more importantly, Avatar: Legends: The Role-Playing Game, which we kickstarted last year in 2021, raising almost $10 million. Now, I've been working in the RPG industry as a Latino designer for more than a decade, and it's been one of the highlights of my career to work on Avatar Legends. And today, I'm going to show you a presentation we call Yip Yip, Building the Team for Avatar Legends, the role-playing game, to show you how we brought the team together for this game and for many of our projects. And my goal here is to show you that the way that Magpie Games works to bring teams together for projects is not to find the right person at the right moment, but actually to find the right person long, long before we need them, and to use opportunities whenever we can to build diverse teams well in advance of needing that diversity. Now, some of you might be wondering, what is a tabletop role-playing game? If you've heard of games like Dungeons and Dragons or Vampire the Masquerade, you're off to a good start. They're usually games with friends, people that you know well, where you get together and tell a collaborative story facilitated by some analog rules. Now, those rules might involve things like rolling dice to find out what happened or drawing from a deck of cards. Sometimes they can involve some digital tools too, but usually just to facilitate the analog rules working smoothly. We make that distinction because a tabletop role-playing game isn't like a board game or a video game in which the story is somewhat constrained and focused by the actual materials the game designers have made. Instead, they're very, very open. So if you're playing Avatar Legends, the role-playing game, you're taking on the role of young people in the Avatarverse who have decided to bring balance to the world. Maybe that means that they've set out to defeat a powerful enemy, but it could also mean that they're trying to learn an important truth or protect an important place. And when you do that, you get to make whatever decisions you want about what your character does. But making tabletop role playing games is challenging. It's first a waterfall process, at least most of the time. You start by designing the game and the systems that underlie it. Everything from social interactions to combat to economies that have to do with the core themes of the game. For example, in Avatar Legends, there's a balance track that represents how in or out of balance the characters are as they pursue their goals. Yet we also have to then write it down because all of our games work from the idea that people bring them to life at the table. They don't, for example, sign in and play the game through some digital medium we have control over. They create that story at their table. So we have to write to give context to the rules, help people understand how to run the game, and eventually even show them what an example of the game might look like. Finally, though, we have to take that writing after it's been edited and after it's been finalized and take it into a published, saleable product that we can put on stores' shelves. Now, that means that any changes to design change the writing, and any changes to writing lead to changes in the production and layout. It's difficult to make last minute adjustments, and for that reason, it's often difficult to make last minute changes to the team. We've pursued a lot of different models when it comes to making games, and what we've learned is that teams really matter. Some of our projects, like Cartel, my game of Mexican narco fiction, well, really were based around like my experiences and my interests, and that meant that I was one of the core people that led on every single part of the project. For this game, we decided we would have a core design staff of our three full-time regular design staff, myself, Marissa Kelly, and Brendan Conway. But we also knew that we wanted a team that had experience working with martial arts in RPGs, with Asian-inspired settings, with issues that Asian-inspired settings have raised in RPGs around Orientalism and other exoticism. And we knew that our core people weren't enough. We know that we needed to have a core design team people within that initial start that had knowledge and experience that we didn't have. My team is very diverse, but it's not covering every last bit of diversity we would want, and we definitely didn't have enough to do Avatar in the way we wanted to. Luckily, we had an existing collaborator who was pretty much perfect. If we thought about a Venn diagram that had martial arts, powered by the apocalypse, which is the system we use to make RPGs, and Asian inspired settings and ideas, at the middle of that Venn diagram is James Mendez Hodes. Mendez was absolutely 100% our first choice for who we wanted to work with. He not only knew all these different pieces that he could bring to the table and work with us on, but we had already worked with him. You see, way back in 2014, when Magpie Games was first getting started, we gave Mendez, as we call him, his first writing job. He worked for us on Urban Shadows Dark Streets, which is a supplement for our Urban Shadows urban fantasy line, and wrote a bunch of sections for the New York setting guide. And in that process, we got to learn Mendez's skills, what he's good at, what he's great at, and also how we work together. After working with us, he went on to have a very productive career in RPGs as a cultural consultant for Asian and Asian American issues, and also for his own game, Thousand Arrows, which again is a powered by the apocalypse, the system we use, RPG set in Japan. So we looked and said, this is absolutely the person we wanted to work with. And I remember calling him and saying, hey, I have this cool project. And he was like, I think I know what it is. And I was like, you probably do. And telling him that he would get to work on Avatar was probably one of my favorite days of working in RPGs, because it wasn't just some random person that I was calling up and saying, hey, we have an Asian game. Are you an Asian expert? Could you work on our Asian game? It was going to an Asian collaborator that we had worked with over and over and saying, you know, all the work we've done, how would you like to see that kind of work again, but at a scale and with attention that you've never seen before? It's an extremely exciting moment. But that wasn't it. We knew that not only did we want people from these communities, the communities touched by Avatar, Asian and Indigenous communities specifically, to be a part of our core design team, we also knew we needed them to be writers, to be designers of specific portions, to be consultants on specific issues. And working closely with Mendez and other allies, we recruited contributing designers who really not only gave us initial ideas about the work, we had some amazing meetings before we even started designing, but also took on specific roles. For example, Senfun Lim, who was actually one of the designers on the Legend of Korra board game, joined us to talk about these issues, and then went on to design many of the techniques that the benders use to do their awesome bending. Yun-Soo Kim, who's been a Choice of Games writer, joined us to talk at the beginning, but then went on to be the primary writer of the setting guide to capture the Avatarverse, doing something like 5 or 6 drafts of the game. And the same goes for Daniel Kwan, Lee Francis, and Shrang Biswas. They're all people who came on board with specific expertise, but then took on roles after they had already become involved with the project. So rather than come to Lee, for example, and say, you're an Indigenous creator, can you read over my manuscript and tell me if it's offensive? We said, Lee, we're starting this project. We want to bring you in early and talk with you before we even assign the work. See what you're interested in, see what your people are interested in, and find those matches well before we actually start on the project. But it's not all about design. We also took a look at our existing successes and failures and realized that project management is a huge problem for us. We do great when it comes to giving people time to make great work, but we often struggle when it comes time to meet those deadlines and get work out the door. Making great art is hard, making it on a timeline is even harder. And so as we start to look through what can we do to strengthen our team, we came across the idea of bringing on someone like Liz Chapardikun. Liz is someone that's worked for us, again, many, many times, joining us on projects across the various things that we do, sometimes as a writer, sometimes as a designer, but in this case, we actually hired her full time to be a part of the Avatar Legends team. And like Mendez and Lee Francis, who we had worked with before, we've worked with Liz many times before. And this is a constant theme that we've seen as we've kind of looked over all of our work and thought about this presentation was how many of these people we had worked with before we even started Avatar. And when I was talking to Liz about what she would want to do for the project, it became clear that she knew her strengths and we knew what it was like to work with her, making it really easy to offer her a full-time position, making sure Avatar got out. And I will tell you that probably one of the proudest moments of all of this was not just making a great game. I'm super excited about Avatar, but making a game that went from a signed contract in October of 2020 to files at the printer 14 months later. It's an incredible timeline for an RPG, and Liz is one of the biggest reasons that happened. So, what's the core takeaway from this? Well, for us, it's about building out networks of resources and relationships long before you actually start doing the work. Rather than say, we've got 3 awesome designers, let's design the game and see where we have holes, we said we have 3 awesome designers. Let's start with that as the core of our team and then build out the team before we start the work so that when work came up, like the chapters that Yunsu wrote or the techniques and various bending powers that Sen wrote, we had a sense of the people that were already on board and part of what we do. And more importantly, it meant that diversity for us was not an end effect, not an after effect. It was core to what we do. We had conversations with Asian American designers and indigenous designers right from minute one about what they wanted Avatar to look like, which meant that we weren't trying to fix problems at the end. We were catching those problems at the beginning. I think that Avatar Legends was a success because we built networks instead of hiring consultants. It sounds trite, but it's really hard. Are you willing to do the work to meet people 5 years ago to work on your game today? Well, that's impossible, right? So, what I'm actually asking you to do is to start working with new people today so that in 5 years, when you do the biggest project you've ever done, you've already got the relationships with them that will make your team a success. Thank you for joining me in this presentation. It's been a real pleasure to tell you about Avatar Legends and how we've put together the team. Look for Avatar Legends, the role-playing game in stores on January 25th, and I'll be around for any questions you've got. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark, for that talk. As for everybody else who's watching, did you know that gdocExpo has a Steam sale going on right now for this very event? If you haven't checked it out already, please do so. You may see some games by some of our speakers in there. Please take a look.